As I know you'd agree, there's nothing like getting and hearing experience from the people who are doing it on the ground. And that's why it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Patrick Glesson. He's the General Manager of Oakey Beef Exports, and I'd also like to welcome him and Ms. Geraldine Dumani, who's our Regional Export Advisor for TradeStart, as Chris mentioned before, to the stage.
Pat, thank you very much for this. I know you've just come back from leave, so it's in at the deep end right from the start. Oakey Beef Exports is a substantial exporting company within our region and very well recognised for that. And you are exporting to a number of markets, including the ones we're discussing tonight, China, Japan and Korea. So to get things started, I think, it's a perfect example of an exporting company in our region who is taking advantage of the FTAs or getting some advantage from them. So we'd like to hear your experience. So I think to get things started, if you wouldn't mind telling us, giving us a bit of a brief about Oakey Beef Exports and what products you're exporting.
Yeah, sure, and thank you very much for having me here tonight. Oakey Beef Exports was bought by the Japanese company from Keongs in 1986, Nippon Ham. So I've had a long-standing relationship with the Japanese and know the markets quite well. In that time, they've spent a couple of $100 million on Oakey alone. We've got a feedlot at Whyalla, which is the largest one in Australia. 60,000 head in that currently. We employ 750 people at the moment at Oakey. We process between 230 and 300,000 head of cattle a year, and we've a vision of increasing that over the next couple of years to 570,000 head of cattle, which will take our workforce up to around 1,300 people.
I think that demonstrates the investment that goes into this region, and particularly with exporters as well. And what products are you exporting from that facility?
Oh, we're predominantly chilled and frozen products. We do a lot of offals as well. We're also in the pharmaceutical space as well, so a lot of byproducts.
I have had exporters through, and they tend to I think it's about 100% of the beast almost is exported.
Yeah, the only thing we can't get in the box is the bellow.
The bellow. So how important to you, there's something else too that was sorting, but anyway.
Yeah.
How important to you, I know that you're across many markets, including the US and Europe, but coming back to the Asian forum, Korea, Japan and China, how important are these markets to you as export markets?
Well, they're essentially the backbone of our business. Japan, 40% of our product goes to Japan, and we see that consistently growing 10% every year. And we'd like to take this moment to thank President Trump too for what he's done, because now we do have a clear advantage, as outlined by Michael earlier, where we've got a 30% versus their 38.5% trade tariff. So well done. Yes, and we intend to take full advantage of that. Korea, it's a little bit tougher. The tariff there, we sit on 29% versus the US on 24%. However, we were on 40%. And if you look at the cost of production, and this goes into an array of things such as wage structures in other countries and regulatory charges, if it wasn't for the tariff being reduced, we would not be able to compete in this market. So even though they do have a slight advantage, we can still, compete pretty aggressively against them. And just to give you an example, the cost of production for a beast in the US, they work on about $150 a head. Brazil's around $90 a head, and Australia's around $320 a head. So, without these tariffs, we would be in a world of hurt, which, then flows the whole way back through the supply chain to the farmer and, all the good people out in the bush that are growing the cattle. China. And China is, we see that as an emerging market. There's only 8% tariff on there. However, there is a few non-tariff trade barriers, I think that's the politically correct way of saying it, where there's still only 12 processors in Australia that have access to the chilled product. And we're not one of them yet. We're confident that we can get there this year. We're hearing a lot of positive stuff about changing that, but the Chinese beef market has reduced significantly from Australia, and this is because currently Brazil, and what I've just said earlier with their cost of production, they are really taking charge of that lower commodity frozen product, and essentially we can't compete with that, so we really have to look at going to the top end of town.
So, looking at the FTAs, and it's been a couple of years, or 3 years, 4 years since you've sort of started and been involved in the FTA process across these markets.
That's correct, yeah.
And so looking at that, you've got a little bit of time now to sort of assess within your business and probably within the industry as well, because you're probably at the pointy end of a supply chain. You have feedlot and contract growth from the region, southern region. What impact do you think the FTAs are having on your business?
Oh, it has a huge impact. Like from a customer perspective, they know that there's going to be a reduction every year of the tariffs, so they're guaranteed to continually supply. So they're assured that we can really firm up those relationships going forward and continue to grow.
And what about a flow on economically to this region?
Well, it all flows back. As the more aggressive we are, we've got to fight against our competitors to source these cattle. And that all flows back to the farmer. So it's a win for everyone along the whole supply chain.
And I'm probably deviating a little bit, but one of the things that we're finding, particularly with these markets, these three markets, and under the FTA agreement, is the building of better relationships with your customers. Are you finding that's happening within your business?
Yes, absolutely. And, we've been lucky enough to have a long-standing relationship, especially with Japan and Korea in particular. They know our business, they know our product, not just from Oakey, but from Australia. And, food safety is integral to those countries. And, to give you an example, we promote a shelf life of 140 days, and this Australia, whereas the US, the best they can get is 70. So, that's all about good practices. And this gets back to what we were talking about earlier with there is regulatory costs, there's negatives, but these are the positives that we can fly our flag proudly every day.
So you do export to many other countries outside this region.
27, yeah.
27. But how is doing business in these three markets different? What are the differences? Are they cultural, relationships, etc.? What are you finding the major differences with these three markets?
Well, as I said, Japan's pretty easy for us. It's Japanese owned. It's a bit of a no-brainer, actually. So it's just they understand, and this gets back to the food safety, packaging. And to give you an example, every establishment has a number for the processing facility, and our number's 558, and it is renowned throughout Asia. You see them coming to our business, and they understand, they know that reverts back to food safety.
It's interesting because we have delegations coming through, and they don't know the name, but they know the number, the establishment number. So yeah. From your experience, and I mean you are an existing exporter, you've been in the export market for a long time, we've got a number of would-be exporters, new exporters and existing. What advice can you give or insights can you give about exporting?
You really have to know your supply chain the whole way through. It is imperative that you get involved with the right stakeholders at every point. It is critical that you can show that you have control of your product from the point it leaves Australia, and I can't emphasise enough, food safety is paramount. If there's even a hint that there's something questionable, you're dead in the water. The other thing, you really have to do some in-depth studies with all your regulatory requirements, importing country requirements. You have to do spend a lot of time ensuring that you have all your ducks in a row there.
Good. All right, well, I've been asking questions. I think we'll sort of throw it over to the floor, so I'll let Cheryl take over from here. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Jerry. Yes, and thanks very much, Pat, for all those insights. We thought, as I mentioned earlier in the program, we'd give you the opportunity to ask any questions of Pat, and they don't necessarily have to be about the beef exporting business. We'll be doing business in these markets generally, and any specific experience you might just want to test with him. Are there any questions at all for Pat? Yes, Lisa. Please stand up and just state your name and where you're from. There's a mic coming to you, sorry. She's getting there. Beg your pardon. Sorry, Lisa.
My name is Lisa from Queensland Food Corporation in Brisbane. And we have won the Queensland Export Award in 2 years in a row. acknowledging our efforts for exporting into China. Now, this free trade agreement is really stir up a lot of anticipation from customers. So they all comes into expecting our product is cheaper, particularly our beef. And my question for you is, from our end, we find on the contrary, our tariff has been decreasing, but the beef price from Australia here has been increasing a lot more than those tariffs decreased. So part of the reasons I work it out is coming from the farm cost and the manufacturer cost. So what's your view on your production side for Patrick? Do you believe this FTA really benefit for your business? And is there more can be done, to decrease the cost to be more competitive?
Yeah, I do see great opportunities, but as I said before, we don't see it working on a commodity product where we can't really compete. But going into that chill space in China, once we get that, we've got visions of changing our whole business. Currently, we're predominantly commodity items, whole cuts, etc., and we're getting into the space of portion control, shelf-ready product, with great visions of supporting the Wagners with their airport. We want to be on that plane every week. We've already started, but we want it to be, consistent. And aiming at that top end of town. That's the only way we can see we're going to get the true return on our investment.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Pat. Anybody else have a question for Pat this evening? Yes, gentleman here in pink in the front. Just get a microphone to you.
Thank you. Ben Goulton from Clifford Goulton Lawyers. Pat, I'm just interested, you're in a lot of markets. The lead time, how long generally, as a rule, are we talking about to get success in those markets? Is there a rule of thumb?
Not really. It really gets down to the connections you have. If you get a lot of pressure from the customers at the other end, and if they've got the connections, that can certainly fast track a lot of it. So, no, there's no real rule of thumb on it, unfortunately.
Thanks, Pat. Yes, the gentleman at the back there. Thank you, in the blue and white.
Well, yes, John Brent, and this might be a bit of a Dorothy Dixon because something I saw yesterday, our first freight train rolled into Bromelton. I'm from that side. SCT have established a $35 million facility there. And I'm anxious to know what sort of role that rail plays in access to your product and maybe from your place to the port.
Well, yeah, that's another area that's very dear to our heart, actually. And just late last year, we've been campaigning for a long time to get rail access to Oakey. And late last year, we had our first train in 23 years re-enter Oakey full of cattle from the Channel Country. So going forward, once it cools down a bit, we want to see that running on a weekly basis. But the next part of that is too that we're looking at building a hub at Oakey to get our containers to port. We see it as a no-brainer. We're there every week. We're putting X amount of containers down the road via the trucks every week. So to take more cost out of our business, that's really high on our radar, on our agenda for this year.
Thanks, Pat. I think we've got time for one more question. If there's a burning question in the audience for Pat, be happy to take it.
No, that's it.
No? You're off the hook, Pat. Oh, no, hang on. There might be one. One more. Gentleman in the front here.
How you going, Pat? Martin, Fairfax Media. I thought since we got a small window of opportunity, we've had with the, unfortunately, with the president, you said, in America, with the decisions made there, how does that most likely affect a business like yours going forward? You said it was a vantage, but you are operating in quite a volatile policy environment, it seems to demonstrate.
Well, yeah, you're quite right, Martin, and well, that's where we're lucky. We've got our business spread over a lot of different markets, so we haven't got all our eggs in one basket, so I guess we don't know what the future holds and what sort of decisions are going to come out of it, so we can just deal with what's in front of us at the moment.
Okay. Thanks very much, Pat. Well, if you would please join me in thanking Pat and Jerry for that. Thank you.